I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lancaster County Planning Commission of March 2nd, 2022. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available at the front of the chambers with the clerk. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of this room. Please note the Planning Commission will be allowing testimony on agenda items by video conferencing for those individuals who pre-registered. If you parked in the parking garage across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cellular phone usage is not permitted in these chambers during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. The Planning Commission action today is final on the following agenda item, 5.1C, Preliminary Plat 04011A. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held February 16th, 2022.
So moved. Campbell.
Second, Rodenberg.
Okay, Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Minutes have been approved, 9-0.
Thank you. The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Shelley to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Shelley, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, first item on the consent agenda is item 1.1, Comprehensive Plan Conformance 22002, to review as to conformance with the 2050 Lancaster County Comprehensive Plan, request for a conservation easement to preserve flood storage capacity and natural resources on approximately 0.53 acres in the northern portion of the lot on property generally located north of A Street and west of First Street. The next item on the consent is 1.2A, Annexation 21005, to annex approximately 53.30 acres, more or less, on property generally located west of North 56th Street between Alva and Arbor Roads. And this is associated with 1.2B, change of zone 21038 from AG Agricultural District H1 Interstate Commercial District and H3 Highway Commercial District to H4 General Commercial District on property generally located at North 56th Street and Arbor Road. Next item is 1.3A, Annexation 22001, to annex approximately 42.35 acres on property generally located at South 70th Street and Rokeby Road, associated with 1.3B, change of zone 22003 from AG Agricultural District to R3 Residential District over approximately 32.89 acres, and is also associated with 1.3C, change of zone 21022A from AG Agriculture District to R5 Residential District PUD to expand the existing Grandview Estates Second Edition PUD by approximately 9.8 acres for a total of approximately 911 multiple family dwelling units and 50,000 square feet of commercial floor area, also both located on property generally located at South 70th Street and Rokeby Road. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site to be disclosed?
No, I don't think so.
If there is anyone here wishing to speak on this consent agenda items, please stand and state that item.
Seeing none, I will take a motion.
I would move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, Rodenberg.
Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
Okay. There are no requests for deferral, so we will now proceed to public hearings. Prior to staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak, unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. The clerk will then indicate you have 1 minute remaining to wrap up your testimony. Once the final minute has lapsed, the clerk will indicate that your time is up. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide them to the clerk. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or continue the public hearing. Shelley, please call the first public hearing item.
Yes, the first public hearing item is 4.1A, change of zone 21054 from AG Agricultural District to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District on property generally located at North 98th Street and Boathouse Road. And this is associated with 4.1B use permit 21010 for multifamily dwellings in commercial pad sites with 505 dwelling units and 48,000 square feet of allowable floor area for commercial uses with associated waivers on property generally located at North 98th Street and Boathouse Road. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No, I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information learned while visiting the site to be disclosed?
No. George?
Thank you. George Wesselhoff, Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. So this is a location here, 98th Street, Waterford Estates Drive. The request is for a change of zone, as stated, from AG Agricultural to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District over 15.80 acres of land. And this includes the portion of this Outlot B of Waterford Estates 26th edition that is not already Zone B2. There is existing B2 on the south side of Waterford Estates Drive as well as the west side of 98th Street. And that was previously established in 2006 as part of change of zone 04019. And that was done at the time without a use permit so that the future residents of Waterford Estates Drive would be aware, or excuse me, of Waterford Estates would be aware that the property would eventually become commercial in nature. At the time, the developer did not have any specific tenants in mind. The B2 district does permit, in addition to commercial, multifamily residential, so that is a permitted use. Moving on to the use permit. Again, same location. The use permit would apply to the entirety of the outlot parcel. And the request is for a new use permit with 505 residential dwelling units and 48,000 square feet of commercial floor area. This total area includes 24.24 acres. And so access points would include connections on the south to Boathouse Road, as well as connection to Waterford Estates Drive on the north. There would not be a direct connection to 98th Street since it's an arterial. The street connections, in addition to those street connections, there would, as a condition of approval, there would need to be a north-south street. It doesn't state in the conditions of approval that it has to be on the east or west side of the property, but there does need to be a north-south street for block length requirements, as well as an east-west street, which would, we'll call it Boathouse Road extension for now. That would be on the south side. And I'll discuss the block length a little bit further at the end. So that's one of the criteria for the street-related conditions for this use permit. Another criteria is addressing and 911, Lincoln Fire and Rescue, as well as Building and Safety Departments reviewed as far as that aspect. And so it's important that we have these named streets, whether they be public or private named streets, as part of the conditions of approval. There was a traffic study that was submitted that was required as part of this development proposal, and the recommended improvements as a result of that, or recommended by that traffic study, is to construct a southbound exclusive right turn lane at North 98th and Waterford Estates Drive, so at the intersection to the northeast of the project. There are associated waivers with this use permit, including a waiver to internal yard setbacks to allow 0-foot internal yard setbacks. This waiver has been approved for other projects previously and will not negatively affect the neighborhood as the setbacks are interior to the site. Also, a waiver request for, from the design standards for outdoor lighting to allow light trespass along the interior lot lines, but not along the exterior lot lines. And that's a waiver that's been approved for other projects as well. I will show another exhibit map here. This map shows the project in question, the use permit, with this white insert, again, 98th Street, Waterford Estates Drive. It also shows on the map here the property to the west, which will be another set of applications following this set of applications. And so what this map is trying to show is just a general framework in terms of streets and block length for both projects. Again, there would be a north-south street. We're assuming, at least on this graphic, that the north-south street for the use permit would be on the east side between the commercial and the apartments. So that would be one north-south street. To the west, there would be a north-south street as a condition of approval for the SEC application, which is subsequent to this application. Then there would be east-west connection or extension of Waterford Estates Drive, as well as we'll call it Boathouse Road on the south side. And then there would be conceptual future streets, including a conceptual street on the east side of the existing SEC campus, as well as this what will be an adjusted conceptual connection to O Street on the south. And so this framework is needed, again, from the standpoint of emergency and addressing purposes, but also due to the block length requirement, which that block length requirement specifically is that block lengths shall not exceed 1,320 feet. And that's measured by measuring along the perimeter. So if this was a block, measure along the perimeter of that area and then dividing by 2. There was no block length waiver requested for this project or the subsequent project next on the agenda, nor do we have any block length exhibits, but we're assuming that with these streets provided, that it would be necessary just based on reasonable estimates in terms of the geography. So with that, I can answer any questions you may have.
Questions, Dick?
George, would you put that last map back up?
Sure.
Where is the Sesostris land?
That land is here. It's kind of on the east side of this LES facility. It's north side of O, right here.
Okay, and is it on the north end? Is it parallel then with the LES land, or does it go further north?
I think the LES facility is here. It's just this rectangular piece. So north of the property you reference would be the SEC application
Right.
The use permit is to the east here in the white.
And that northern apartment building, those lots right north of that, across the street,
Yes.
they have their driveways off of that interior street?
I believe so. They're off the interior street.
So their backyards are what's of those 3 lots in particular, really maybe 4. Those would all have backyards towards the apartment,
I believe so.
but they do have the street in between.
Correct. They do have the street, and then there would also be the B2 setback is 20 feet for front yard. So they'd have the street right away plus the setback.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Lorenzo?
Yes, I wanted to just get confirmation in terms of block length and requirement for the street. So there is no waiver, but for Waterford Estate Drive, is the expectation for this application to extend to the west for this application?
Yes, actually, this aerial is not up to date. There's a segment here on the aerial that it doesn't show the street physically there, but if you drive out there, it is physically there within this yellow right-of-way area.
Okay. And then the second question, I know there was a requirement for the bike trail. Where is that on the map?
That would be along the south side of the project as well as the south side of the next project.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah. George, that notch that goes into the detention basin, is that the notch down to the right, to the west side? No, down. There you go.
Oh, you mean the flood area?
Yeah, is that a floodplain?
Yes, there's floodplain in there, and as we'll mention or get into in the next application, that's one of the reasons why this conceptual street is being shifted.
George, that kind of right in there, the lot directly south of this use permit application, is that land developable? I mean, is it floodplain? Could they put buildings in there?
I think there's floodplain in there. Yeah, maybe I could switch to the viewer map here. Yeah, there's floodplain for most of that property.
Okay. So I noticed in the application letter, it was requested for a rear yard setback reduction along the south property line, along outlet C.
Mm-hmm.
Has that been rescinded? Like they're not requesting that anymore?
Well, I can clarify. The reason that that's not in the staff report is because they have to put in the street, the public street, and therefore that would not apply. Their initial proposal just had it as a private drive. So there'd be a front yard versus that street on the south side.
Okay. And then the other thing I noticed is that there was talk about, if this development doesn't go as planned, which happens, of exchanging commercial to residential at a rate of 3 units for 1,000 square feet. But they would do that by administrative amendment. Is that still being considered? Do we have to put that in the site conditions or anything like that, or is that just a given?
No, they're actually limited by the B2 lot area requirements, which is 2,000 square feet per dwelling unit. And I think it's in the staff report, they could go up to 527. They're requesting 505. So as long as they don't exceed 15% of that 505 number, they could administratively add it, but they cannot exceed the maximum of 527.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you. Was there any neighborhood meeting held?
Yes, I was unable to attend, but I think the applicant could speak to
Okay.
that meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? George, can you point out the street, the proposed traffic signal again? I just want to make sure I understand.
So it would be the right southbound turn lane.
Okay.
Yet there on 98th Street. This is Waterford Estates Drive.
Okay. And then where are the entry points into the development?
Well, there'd be this on the south side with the street on the south, and then there'd be an entrance off Waterford Estates Drive on the north. There would not be a direct access to 98th Street.
Okay. Thank you.
It looks to me, when I was looking at it, are there going to be 2 access points to Waterford Estates?
Yes, that's a good point of clarification. They are showing to,
Okay.
As it stands now, unless they would propose otherwise, that they're both private drive entrances.
Okay.
But one of them would have to be there would have to be one that would have to be a public street connection.
Okay.
And there's no discussion with regard to screening or anything that's different in the B2 with regard to the neighborhood to the north?
No, they would be required street trees as well as landscaping for the apartments. So there would be significant landscaping required on the north side.
And, okay, so this is being done under a use permit. What are the next steps after the use permit is in place?
After the use permit, they would have to final plat because it's just an outlot right now. And
Okay.
once it's final platted, then they could apply for building permits.
So during that process would be perhaps waivers might come forward in terms of block length at that time? Because you seem to be surprised that there aren't any that were with this application.
Well, what we're stating is that if we have the streets as shown on this general framework map here, we're presuming, and we don't have a block length exhibit for sure, but that this would address that concern. Otherwise, without north-south streets, it would, I think, this area to the west would be, if you include both parcels, I think it's like close to 6,000 feet, and then you would divide that by 2. So no, there's not a block length waiver request. We're not saying or suggesting there's one that's needed at this time.
Sure, understood. But it could come through that final platting process if it, not,
It would have to come through this process if
Okay.
it was requested.
okay. And then with regard to the change of zone, you mentioned that, what the request is B2 or ag to B2, but not for the entire development because that northern portion as well as the portion on the east is already B2.
Correct. Yeah, this B2 area is existing today. That's in the green, and this is Waterford Estates Drive. This is 98th Street. There's other portions as well to the east, on the east side of 98th Street, that were established in 2006, kind of to set the framework for future commercial, future B2 uses, which could also include multifamily residential.
Thank you. Other questions?
I'm just going to reiterate what you just said, so make sure I'm understanding. Even if we didn't approve this today, they could still by right build multifamily units in that B2 strip.
No, we don't have a use permit even for that strip of B2. That was actually waived in 2006. There was no use permit that was approved. So there would still have to be a use permit even if they came in for the linear area.
Okay.
Any other questions for George right now? Thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant testimony?
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me a minute to get myself arranged here. My name is Ann Post. I am an attorney with Rembolt Ludke Law Firm. I'm here today on behalf of Aristos Properties LLC, which is the developer or the builder in this project. So first, I want to start with kind of an overview of the project. Also, maybe address some of the concerns that we've heard from the neighborhood, and then kind of finally get into the use permit. So first is an overview of this project. As was discussed, the intent of this project is to build actually a resort luxury resort-style apartment community. This builder has built a similar community at 40th and Hohensie Drive. And so this is a apartment community that will include ample green spaces. The idea is to include ample parking, and these will all be market rate apartment buildings. And then on the south side of this property, the idea was to include some flexibility. So that's where under the B2 zoning that allows both commercial and residential, with the B2 zoning to allow both commercial and residential, that the idea right now is commercial, but as the last 2 years have taught us, the market changes quickly. And so to provide that flexibility that if residential slows down, build out commercial. If commercial slows down, we can build out residential. In either way that we are able to make a productive use of that property. This project is actually intended to build out in several phases. Right now it's anticipated to build out in 3 to 4 phases. The project is going to start at the south end of the property, taking that access from Boathouse Road. It's anticipated to build out over 8 to 10 years, just depending on market conditions. And so that's where there is some concern about the access and the traffic that this might be driving to Waterford Estates Drive. This project will not access that until it starts to build out further and until those additional units and those subsequent phases are built out. Let's see, as far as a neighborhood meeting, some of the other comments that we have received from the neighborhood, I want to reiterate what I know Commissioner Corr just asked about, that this property, it is designated in the future land use plan for commercial use. There has been a strip of B2 zoning along the roadside portion of this property for years. And the intent for that was so that there is no surprise to Waterford Estates homeowners, that they know when they built their house, that this was eventually going to develop commercial. Also to that end, if you look at the actually in the covenants for the single family home for this area, there is a specific acknowledgement that this property will be commercial and will be built out with commercial and with uses allowed in B2. And so we did hold a neighborhood meeting for this project. We had very limited attendance at that point. And so we were happy to talk to anyone who showed up. I think that meeting was held at 40th and Hohensie Drive. So that is a little far away from this project, but the intent of that was that this project is going to be very similar to the project that was there. Often we have, in my experience at neighborhood meetings, we often have the neighbors ask, well, what is this project going to look like? What quality is this going to be built to? Elevations are wonderful, but even better is to be able to show a project and actually what the built product looks like, how it's laid out, the quality that it's built to. And that's why we hosted the meeting there. And also encouraged in the letter for even people that weren't able to attend to go and visit the website, drive around so they know the quality of product that's being brought into this area and the quality of product that this builder will build. So subsequent to that, we did hear from the Waterford neighborhood that there were more people with questions. And so we have had communication. They organized to submit a kind of a list of written questions. We were able to get them answers to that, which I understand were posted on their neighborhood website, Facebook, on their neighborhood website and circulated to the neighborhood. So we have made efforts to engage, to answer any questions that the neighborhood has asked. So let's see, with that, that gets us to the use permit and what we're looking, so that is an overview of the project, an overview of the change of zone that we're asking for and our engagement with the neighborhood. Next, I want to move on to the use permit. Planning talked about several conditions to approval that are contained within the use permit. And we are asking, I will distribute now a motion to amend a few, specifically 2 major conditions to approval. The first one being to remove the condition for that southbound right turn lane at 98th and Waterford Estates Drive. And the second one being to clarify the width of that southbound public, or the public street that's on the south end of the property. So I will provide, who can I give this to?
Thank you.
copy of the motion to amend. So first, I'll start with the big one first, and that is elimination of the southbound right turn lane. Here is a site plan. I will acknowledge that this site plan is slightly different from the site plan that's in your packet. The reason being is that this reflects that this south street is actually a public street instead of a private roadway. Major difference being that setback that was identified, and also that there's no parking off the street there. So that does change this site plan a little bit. You'll see here. Thank you. So the condition, and I have a map that I may be able to show it better here. The condition of approval regarding the southbound right turn lane would require this project to build a turn lane here to access Waterford Estates Drive. So the issue and why we're asking that be removed is that a traffic study was performed that this project does not trigger the need for that southbound right turn lane. When that traffic study was performed, it was demonstrated that conditions already exist that would require that southbound right turn lane. That a traffic study was performed in 2006 when the larger plan for the Waterford Estates development was put in place, and that showed that there would be a need for a right turn lane there, and so that was shown in 2006, and in 2014 when 98th Street was constructed, the city made the decision not to go ahead and build that right turn lane at that point. So that's to say that that even if this right turn lane is necessary, this project and should be built, this project doesn't trigger that need, and that this project should not carry the cost of that right turn lane. And so, should not carry the cost of that right turn lane. Next, as I talked about, this project is going to be phased from south to north. What that means is that this project is going to start taking access from Boathouse Road onto this south public street and is not going to drive traffic or connect to Waterford Estates Drive until it is much closer to that full build out. That those northern buildings are the last portion of this project that's going to be built. Those buildings may be built anywhere from 8 to 10 years from now. And therefore that this project will not be driving traffic to that intersection. To the extent that it does, it won't be doing that for 10 years. And finally, to the extent that this project does contribute to traffic there, because this is a project, there are apartments here, we are increasing trips, and it will contribute to traffic, it will be paying impact fees. And the goal and purpose of impact fees is so that when there is new development, that those fees are used to expand the capacity of the city's infrastructure. This project will pay impact fees, and those should be used. That's the policy of why those exist, is that those should be used to pay for infrastructure such as this right turn lane. So the next item that we're asking to amend is more of a clarification item, and that is regarding that South Street. I'm sorry, I keep bouncing back and forth to this exhibit. I should just leave it there. Anyway, so that is this street that is shown as a public street on the south end of the project here. You'll notice that condition of approval 2.9 stated that it should be clarified what the width of that street would be. What we are asking to clarify is that the width of that street would be identified as 33 feet wide, and 33 feet wide street is generally to accommodate commercial traffic. So we're suggesting that it should be 33 feet wide as it connects to Boathouse Road, and as it gets past this intersection, which would connect to commercial development, potential commercial development further north. But then as you get past that, it tapers to 27 feet wide. And so 27 feet wide actually then would connect to the private roads proposed for the Southeast Community College development, where those are proposed to be 27 feet wide. So that is a width that is both more typical for residential to accommodate the residential traffic that we'd see with this project, and also would smoothly merge into the connecting development of Southeast Community College. And so with that, I have a letter that steps through a little bit of this in more detail for you to take a look at whenever you get the time. But with that, I would ask if you have any questions that I could answer, and I would ask you to support this change of zone and support this permit with amendments as proposed. Questions for Ann?
And can you kind of give us an example of, I mean, you say luxury apartments, can you tell us like how many bedrooms, what kind of price point?
You know, I can't tell you, I don't know what the price point was going to be right now. I also know that construction is anticipated to start on the first phase of this in 2024, so any price point that we give you now could fluctuate. I can tell you that it is intended to be market rate. I believe, well, I won't tell you how many bedrooms. I'll get that information for you and maybe provide that information on rebuttal. But that it is intended that there will be multiple bedrooms. So that's a great question. I'll get you some more information on that.
There seems to be some confusion on the letters that we were receiving that some were like, well, this is supposed to be luxury, but this is also supposed to be affordable housing. So that's kind of why I'm asking.
Yeah, there's no affordable housing component to this project.
Okay. When did you hold the neighborhood meeting? Like how long ago?
I believe, let's see, I know that we held it on a day when Monday was a holiday, so it was, I can't recall off the top of my head. It was before the application was submitted. The notice was sent to everyone that notice of the zoning application would have been submitted, or would have been sent to. We also provided it to Waterford Estates LLC so that they could post it and provide notice of it to the homeowners associations as well, so that there would be an awareness of the meeting.
Is that Hohensie project complete?
I believe they're just finishing the final phases of it.
Okay.
Yes.
I think that's all the questions I had.
Any other questions? Dick?
And your motion number 3, to amend, remove section 3.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, so section 3 would require escrows for any improvements to arterial streets. We're asking to remove the condition that we put a turn lane on an arterial street. Therefore, there wouldn't be any improvements to arterial streets and no need to escrow. So that's why we asked for that to be removed.
In '06, I think, was the year that you said that originally a traffic study was done at that time.
Yes.
And in 14, then that road was built without the turn lane.
Correct.
What was the reasoning at that time for seeing a need for a south turn lane there?
I can tell you that the traffic study showed that as anticipated, the traffic study anticipated traffic in 2015 and then 2030. The 2006 traffic study showed that in 2015, the anticipated traffic generated by the development that was anticipated was going to require a turn lane at that location.
Won't most of the traffic be coming off of O Street onto 98th?
For this project, I would anticipate yes, and that the first phases of this project are going to be taking access from Boathouse Road.
Right.
And so that is where the majority of the traffic, that's also going to be where the clubhouse is located, where the main entrance is located. So the layout of this project really drives all of its traffic to that connection off Boathouse Road. And then also, I will say that Brad Marshall is here that can probably answer your questions about the traffic study in a little bit more detail. So let me know, correct me wherever I got anything wrong.
Hey, thank you.
I don't know about an answer. Brad Marshall, Olson, 601 P Street, Suite 200. Oh my gosh. Okay. So the turn lane, Dick. Yeah, we did a traffic study. This is when Waterford Estates was coming in and just being approved for the preliminary plat. So a traffic study back in 2006 was a lot larger. I mean, it studied several different intersections, beyond the limits of the project. And at Boathouse, what they project in that study, they project 2015, 2030. To 2015, they with the growth assumptions that we made, it showed that a dedicated right turn lane would be done. So they built this city, and I should say, as part of the development, they built from O to Boathouse, They built everything south of Waterford Estates Drive, right? So Waterford Estates Drive, and they built everything south. This is a picture in 2014. So the study today, so to clarify, the study today is smaller, but it's more directed to just this project. And the study says, what impacts will this project have? And so we studied, we extended it up to Holdridge, because Holdridge and 98 is a pretty important intersection, and then O and 98, and then Waterford Estates Drive, Boathouse. So we studied all those intersections as part of this project. What the study pretty much says is the existing conditions and taking in consideration of access management policy today, that intersection requires, because it connects to an arterial street, it requires a turn lane. So in 2014, when the city built the extension, so they built everything north, you can see in 14 it's under construction here. It was not built. We don't know. Olson actually designed it with the city, and I talked to the designer and I said, hey, what was the reasoning for it? And really no definitive answer to why. It just wasn't. It's where it goes from 4-lane to 2-lane. So it's on a taper. And so there's a lot of logical reasons why not to do it. But at the same time, you can see there is already development happening to the west. And so this logically is going to be utilized, and right turn lanes may, have had benefit at the time. And it will benefit now, as part of the project. I think what we're saying from this project is it's not warranting it under a condition that it's already warranted, the project. And there's
The traffic that would justify a turn lane would be purely coming from the residential that extends core to Holdridge Street, going south, correct? If they were going to go to O Street or turn on Waterford Drive, or whatever it is.
Say that again, so I understand you.
The need for a turn lane would be to aid people in the residential that's north of that intersection to turn onto Waterford with a right-hand turn lane. But it has nothing to do with the apartments.
The apartments will increase traffic. There's no doubt about it. I don't think we're.
But they're not going south.
They could be.
They will. Yeah, there will be a full access turn, Dick. So here is the turn lane would be cut off of this one here, but there will be a connection at this location, which will be a full access.
Yep.
There will be the private roadway, which we've agreed to with planning department to provide at that, which will be a right in, right out.
But the south turn lanes on the north side of that intersection.
Yeah. So somebody coming from Holdridge would be turning west.
Yep.
And could be utilizing any of these. There's also one factor that I take into consideration here too, and it hasn't been. We've got an upcoming application for rezoning to the west. This study does not take into account anything for what is being planned to the west. So that plan is to show Waterford Estates Drive to extend to Southeast Community College, and because of the size and the requirements for the traffic study, we didn't expand that to show the impacts to Southeast Community College too. But the city is, I think, where we're asking the motion to amend is the city is requiring this project to carry that burden.
I'm just having difficulty seeing how much traffic is coming from the north that would justify the turn lane at any point in time. And the only thing I can come up with is traffic that comes from Holdridge and wants to get to O Street or to turn and go to Southeast Community College from the north.
there's other factors to take into consideration. I mean, there's a lot happening here, and I can't communicate that to everybody here. 98th stops at O today, but as we know, there are plans for that to be built also. And traffic on 98th, regardless of this project, is going to be much, much greater. I know the city's got some projections of what those look like, and 10,000 trips a day are expected after 98's extended from
Comes
O
through
today.
from A Street.
Yeah, so that will play into it in several years, and that probably is just around the time that a lot of this project is getting, opened, because I think Ann said it's a couple of years off till they start building and they finish their project down on Ohensie, and then they move to this one and start concentrating on it.
And this would be a question for you and Brad, but what are the impact fees on an apartment project?
So, good question. $1,600 per unit. So if you kind of do some quick math, 500 units, $800,000 would be generated from this project. We'll pay for a turn lane. Yeah. It will. And I think from Aristo's perspective is the city is going to have those impact fees available to them eventually. I'll just point out one little wrinkle that I've mentioned to planning department to consider is right now any impact fees that are in Waterford Estates are being directed to 104th for the roundabout project next to the school. So conceivably, if Aristo was approved on this project and they came in for a building permit and they paid their impact fees, they couldn't even pay themselves back immediately. Their impact fees would actually go to other obligations within the development. Until that's paid off. I should finish that. Until that's paid off, then it could be directed to 98th.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Ann and Brett? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll take testimony in support. And I'll just, a reminder that testimony will be in support, for both associated items.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski, Seacrest and Kalkowski Law Firm, 1128 Lincoln Mall, Suite 105. Appearing today on behalf of Waterford Estates, LLC, so the underlying property owner who's got the contract to sell the property to Aristos. And I just wanted to reiterate maybe some things you've already heard here from George and from Ann, but I've been working on this property for probably almost 20 years and actively, in the public realm since 2005, started having conversations about the annexation agreement out here. So this project has been around for a long time. As I mentioned, an annexation agreement was completed and a master plan for the entire project back in 2006. The annexation agreement was approved. At that time, it was very important to these developers that we do whatever we could to put future homeowners on notice that there was commercial planned at these corners, both corners. So not only this west side, but also on the east side. And so at that time, when we first put into place the R3 zoning for the residential, we put into place those strips of B2. Just, again, total disclosure. This is coming, it's going to be here. And then as Ann mentioned, we went one step further when we filed covenants. And this one's a little unusual. We filed covenants on the entire project, all of the residential project at one time out here. And again, in those covenants, we put specific language about the two commercial corners. At that time, the B2 zoning was in place. We referenced the B2 zoning. There was a little bit of B1 zoning on the east side. And we specifically said there can be any and all uses permitted in a B1, in a B2, in an I3, because there was also the potential for some light industrial or employment center uses out here. So I know this may come as a surprise to neighbors, but I think we've tried to do everything that would put them on notice that these uses were coming. We tried to master plan, the annexation agreement master plan, the road improvements, sewer, water, for the entire development, and as Brad mentioned, worked with the city, and in fact, instead of just doing the 2-lane on 98th Street, back when it was constructed, did the 4-lane for a distance in order to accommodate the traffic that would be generated by some commercial uses, or B2, B1, I3 uses at these two corners. So, supportive of the application. I think it provides another type of housing in a large development. This isn't an instance where anything is changed. We haven't changed the plan. In fact, if I put the 2006 plan up from the annexation agreement, you're going to say, wow, it actually developed the way we planned it in 2006. And I think by adding the multifamily just gives us another dimension of housing choices in a neighborhood that's really been attractive to a lot of residents of our city. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you need anything from a historical knowledge perspective.
Any questions? Cindy?
One of the questions that several of the people have written in who are homeowners around the lake is their concern about access to the water.
Right. So when we set up the covenants in Waterford Estates, there's basically a lake association. Primary purpose is to maintain that lake. The whole entire development are members of the lake association, because the main function of that lake is to serve as a detention cell for this entire development. So both commercial corners are part of that lake association as far as paying dues to contribute to the maintenance of that as a flood storage facility, right? They have no rights to access the lake, right? And so, as Ann mentioned, I think this is going to be a full amenity apartment complex. The apartment dwellers are going to have all these nice amenities on their own site. I don't see it being a big issue with the use of the lake, but policing the lake is going to be an issue for the Waterford residents, into the future, because as you mentioned, we've got neighbors to the east now in Dominion that don't necessarily have rights to use the lake. We'd have the commercial and apartment dwellers, and so it's a reality, but it was contemplated specifically in the covenants, no rights to use the lake, and they don't pay extra dues because of that.
Thanks.
Does the does the neighborhood to the north have access to the lake?
Just anybody from Waterford. Here's my old 2006 map.
Sure.
All the way basically south of Holdridge Street. I mean, the Waterford development goes from Holdridge Street, stops over here, and then you've got Dominion, and then...
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And while you have that up,
Yes.
is the school on there?
Yep, right here.
Okay, thanks.
Again, school exchange was done way back early on, so the school has always been master planned in this site also.
So really, if you lived in the apartments and you had a child attending this school, your route would be north on 98th.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And your route home would be south on 98th.
Yep.
Thank you.
I want to piggyback. I want to make sure that, so there was a comment in one of the letters about paying to access the lake, and that's that same conversation you were having with Cindy, was the covenant fees for that.
Right, so all of the single-family residential homeowners have rights to access the lake. And then, there's special rights for those lots specifically on the lake with the ability to have docks and that sort of thing. But every single-family homeowner, by virtue of being a single-family homeowner out here, has rights to use the lake.
There's public access points?
There's not public access, Dick. There are points of outlots around the lake where if you don't have a boat or a kayak to go out, you could stand on an outlot and fish, or on the marina lot.
Got it.
The dock there.
Yeah, thanks.
Other
But
questions?
but it's not public. It would just be for the residents of
Right.
Waterford.
Other questions for Danae?
Yes.
Rich?
The homeowner association is not in the hands of the homeowners at this point, is that correct?
You are correct. And we are about, well, we're hoping to get it turned over this summer, because we just are getting all of the outlots finished up and turned over.
Is there a magic number, 60% sale, or?
Actually, we're down to like 2 outlots. to get transferred. No, it's really kind of completion of all of the outlots and transfer to the association before it will get turned over.
Because that was one of the concerns, is that the corporation that is currently overseeing the association didn't get the word out. And so that was a concern. That's just a question I had as to why.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Other testimony in support? Is there any neutral testimony? I'll take testimony in opposition.
Good afternoon. My name is Dave Widener. I'm at 1050 Saltillo Road. I am here on behalf of the Sesostris Shrine. And unfortunately, our legal counsel could not make it today, so I'm just going to read the letter that he sent out to Mr. Whisselhoff and myself. When Sesostris bought the property it owns, there was an agreement between the seller, SCC's predecessor in title, that there would be a north-south street constructed along the east boundary of the shrine property, the cost of which would be shared by Sesostris and the owner of the land to the east. The proposed change would eliminate that access point to O Street and instead place the entire obligation of construction of the street on Sesostris. That is unacceptable, and we strongly object to the proposed change to the preliminary plat. Inasmuch as Southeast Community College has made no effort to communicate with Sesostris on this matter, despite phone calls to their legal counsel and the engineering firm, we request that this matter be deferred for at least 2 weeks to encourage direct communication between these abutting landowners. There will be a representative of Sesostris at the Planning Commission to make this request in person. That's me. And that's all I have.
Can you borrow one of the maps from George or so?
Here, I have one.
I'd like to see where it originally was planned.
But this is actually with regard to the next item, correct?
Yeah, Steve Henderson, the Planning Department. I'm sorry if we didn't make this clear. It's actually the next item, and this is very
I'm so
confusing.
sorry.
Yeah, no,
they're
there's
all
two
connected.
Waterford
related, so-
plans.
They are, they're all connected.
Yeah, so you definitely have the right to come back up and have your
Okay.
testimony for the next item.
Well, better too soon than too late. I
Good
That's
suppose.
right.
Yes, excellent. So,
So I get another chance?
Yeah.
To reread that?
oh, yes.
Okay, I got my
absolutely.
practicing thing.
Thank
But
you
yeah,
so much.
he'll be for the next item, and it is a little confusing. We have two big projects side by side.
Yes.
But we do have one person on Zoom
Okay.
who does want to testify on this one.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Okay, I think we have someone on Zoom. I don't know if you can hear me or not, but if you can, please state your name and address for the record.
It's Travis. 9521 Southern Sky Road.
Can you state your name again? You cut out, or you started right, we didn't quite catch your name.
It's Travis Sucksdorf.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Sucksdorf. Please go ahead.
I'm opposing this project in general. My topics are this traffic for 98th and O Street. You guys talked about the traffic study being done. It's hard to comprehend how this traffic study is going to give any realistic vision of the problems that will need to be addressed, especially before the study's being done, especially before a school and two huge complexes are being built on Holdridge and on 105th and O Street. It seems that with all the variables, the study is obviously severely premature for the impact that this traffic's going to have on this area. I mean, O Street is already bottlenecked to the point that traffic, it does not accommodate it. It backs clear up past the college on a regular basis. O Street is just nowhere near this ready to accommodate any kind of traffic load that you're going to add to it on top of what's already going to be before this project is complete. My next issue is the apartments that Waterford Estates Drive, they're proposed to be directly across the street from the homeowner's backyard with just a 20-foot easement. When they're proposing a 4-level apartment, I mean, you're looking at an 80-foot tall building. This, 20 foot across the street and an 80-foot tall building, this is still going to be incredibly intrusive. I'm one of them that when we bought years ago, that B2 zone, we were always told, it was sold on the fact that this land would, it was all going to be built into retail. It was also stated on Olson's site about 100 acres of retail. I mean, I can't imagine anybody that would pay the prices that these lots and homes were worth or are worth to be completely engulfed by an apartment that can see everything you have and everything you're doing. And any lot that is on that Waterford estate that's impacted by that apartment, right, that's on that Waterford Estates Drive, regardless of what the county assesses them at, these lots will surely lose value pending a homeowner trying to sell. If these apartments were in before the house, you would be rezoning these spots that are directly behind this apartment because they would be sitting empty. I would hope there would be some kind of compromise with this. And my last big issue with this is that is the lack of notice. The HOA said the letters were sent out a month or two ago prior to the city letter that went out to less than 20 recipients to all Waterford State homeowners concerning a meeting with developers. I myself did not receive this, and I am directly off Waterford Estates Drive behind that apartment. I would have jumped all over this. We reached out on social media and found out that so many other homeowners did not receive this letter as well. I can assure you that there are still homeowners that know nothing of this project. The HOA is like you guys would talk before. It's still run by a director that works for the original developer, of Waterford. He made it known that the notification of the homeowners about these items would have been an inconvenience. So there was not even he didn't even bother, with doing anything about it, notifying everybody. The HOA has been obviously fighting. Residents have been fighting to get this into their own hands for a while now, and now just learning that it's going to be turned over somewhat soon. I'm just asking that that you please do not pass this as is. There's a lot at stake here, and I'm asking that you please give consideration and give the Waterford Estate homeowners a fair and notified opportunity to voice our concerns with the developer so that we can come up with ideas or compromises that will suffice the estate homeowners. Because let's face it, I mean, in this situation, us homeowners, we're the little guy, but we have a voice. It may be small, but every family has a huge stake and investment into our lives that we have, made at Waterford. And that is all I have to say on this matter.
All right, thank you. We appreciate you calling in. Is there anyone else with testimony in opposition to these items? Okay. Staff questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Come on up, George. Who wants to go first? Lorenzo?
I'll go first. So Brad, I think, showed a picture of 98th and the right turn into Waterford. And I'm trying to get a visual of what's there now. Do you have a map of that? I'm looking at Google Maps on it, which may not be the most up-to-date, or maybe it is.
Sure, I don't know if they have a zoom map, but it's basically green area that's within the right-of-way. In other words, the street right-of-way is there, the city property for the street, but the physical street for that turn lane component was not installed previously.
And can you zoom into that?
Yes. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, you can see kind of this taper, but there's green area within the right of way. And then you can see the kind of the end point or terminus of where that turn lane would connect to.
George, is somebody here from LTU?
Yes, I was going to mention Sabrina's here from LTU.
He was waiting.
Okay. So it's widening that green space for the turn lane. Is that correct?
Bob Simmering, LTU. And the question?
So that green space that you see?
That's where it would be built, yes.
Okay.
So talk to us a little bit more about this traffic study that was referenced in 2006 and the decision whether it was already necessary versus whether it's becoming necessary as a result of this project.
What I would throw into this conversation is there are as many housing units in this parcel as there are in all of Waterford. So put that in your thinking. That's how big of an impact this has. As I understand, the peak hour turning movement now is 2, and it's going to go to 45 based on what this development shows. And Brad can correct me if that's not right. And that is generally what we look at as far as the traffic congestion issues, safety issues, what's going on in peak hour. So based on that, number of units, the peak hour traffic, it would be time to build that turn lane.
I don't want to take away from more questions along that issue. I'm curious as to what the long-term plans are at 98th and O as well, with regard to turning off of O from either direction onto 98th Street going north.
I can tell you that there's an entire attention being given to this corridor, and for the sake of the homeowners that had some questions that were about traffic in the entire area, we have a proposal for a study and a safety improvement and capacity improvement at 84th and O. At 98th and O, I believe the turn lanes are built already. So at some point, there may be a signal required there or other issues that, adjustments on that level. But the other thing that's going into this as far as traffic goes is there's a study, school safety crossing study being done on 98th because of the school being there. So we have all of those factors in our minds and are working on those things. They will be coming after this development starts and hopefully before it's built out.
Okay. Dick?
Can you also indicate to me how this development is going to affect turns coming from the north to go on to Waterford from 98th?
You're saying southbound?
Uh-huh. Because the only thing I can come up with in my mind is parents picking up kids after school and coming back south. That's the only time I see any generation of traffic.
I think that would be a major one, but I think if you went to Hy-Vee and you were coming back, you'd come across Holdridge, you'd come down there and come in. I don't think that would be unusual. You'd be avoiding the 84th and O intersection, which I believe that's a very logical choice people would make. So that entire commercial site up there on Hy-Vee would probably feed down into this site as well.
Right? That's legit.
Yeah.
Can you address the comment that was brought up for the use of impact fees to do this versus the developer doing this?
It could still be paid for by impact fees, but that would not be paid immediately. There is a district for the impact fees. He can build it, and unfortunately for the Waterford entire subdivision, in this parcel, it's going to Holdridge and 98, so there won't be anything that they could take for that turn lane. But within the district, there will be other impact fees, and as they come in, they could be reimbursed, but it would not be soon.
Okay, so they're reimbursed. Okay.
Are there any plans, White O Street is 4 lanes at 84th and O, but then it tapers down just to 2 lanes. Are they going to extend those 4 lanes, out east? What are the plans for that?
I think in some long range plan there is, but at this point, we couldn't put a date to that.
Other questions for Bob?
Yes. Approximately when might the 98th go south of O Street to A Street?
The way it is right now, it needs to be done before 2030 in order for us, because of some right-of-way agreements we have, so sometime between now and 2030.
Thanks.
And Bob, isn't it correct that the state's already done engineering work out past 134th for widening O Street?
Yeah, I believe they have, yes.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Other questions for Bob? Other questions for George? Thank you, Bob.
Yep. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just, sorry.
George, how does staff feel about the amendments that the applicant presented?
We weren't aware of them, and haven't had a chance to review them, so we would suggest a 2-week deferral so we could review what's proposed.
Do we know at this time how high these apartment buildings are gonna be?
No height waiver was requested. The B2 height limit, I believe, is 55 feet, so it'd be per the standard B2 requirement.
So that would be about 5 stories.
I might let the applicant speak to the
Sure.
specifics, but they would follow the standard B2 requirement.
I just was kind of drilling down on some of the comments made by testifiers and the letters so that they know it's not going to be 8 stories. And can you also, just for the record, explain the mailing notice practices so people know why the whole area didn't get a notification?
Right, so the requirement is a 200-foot radius around the outermost boundaries of the property in question. It's not a requirement to notify everyone in the adjacent Waterford Estates subdivision or any other subdivision. It's a distance requirement. In addition, we post signs on the property, and there's a newspaper ad as well. There were signs, yellow zoning signs posted on Waterford Estates Drive for both this project and the one to the west. I did get a call on the SCC one when it was posted.
I gotta say, I'm still confused about this B2 strip. So when the present homeowners would have purchased their lot to build, they would have been told that that was zone B2 and that commercial could have been in there. But also, because it's B2, some residential could have went in there at that as well.
Yeah, keep in mind, there's not presently a use permit. It's only the B2 zoning, and that was established just to kind of set the stage for future B2 use, but there's no use permit today. So even if they were proposing to develop just what's a zone B2 today, they still would have to apply for a use permit.
Okay, but when you say use permit, that's, okay, go away with that for a minute. Before we get to that point, so these people, when they purchased their lots, they were told, oh, well, commercial can go into this strip. What I'm trying to get at is, it's not just commercial. B2 allows apartments,
Yes.
homes, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been residential or it could have been commercial, either, that's already decided upon. Yes, they would have had to file a use permit, but
Correct. The residential and or commercial would be permitted under the B2.
okay.
There was also, oh, I'm sorry, Dick?
I was just about to say, I don't know that people would necessarily understand that B2 equals residential and commercial, and that residential could also include apartments, multiple family units, et cetera. And I think that's where some of the confusion may arise. I mean, it's one thing if there's a Starbucks going in, but it's another thing to have 500 apartments.
But I want to kind of dispel the rumor that this is not a bait and switch type situation.
No, I mean, there would have been the notifications at the time of the change of zone in 2006, which would be similar to today. And then, as the applicant indicated, there were the private confidence or private information outside of this change of zone process where the residents were put on notice essentially.
Rich?
There was a question as to the proximity of the apartment building to the homes on the other side of Waterford. So including setbacks and the width of the street, right-of-way, how close would they be?
So the right-of-way, I forget the exact right-of-way width, it would be 60 feet if not wider in that location there at Waterford Estates Drive. Then you'd have the 20-foot front yard setback for the B2, and then you would have the rear yard setback for the R3, so it would be probably close to 100 feet approximately, just depending on which specific home. And there would be landscaping. I did look into that question of the landscaping. So there would be 3 particular requirements on that Waterford Estates Drive side. There would be the street trees along Waterford Estates Drive. There would be.
Or do you want to pull that map down because it's?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me zoom out again.
Thank you.
So again, this area here, the north side of the northernmost apartment building along Waterford Estates Drive, there would be street trees along Waterford Estates Drive. There's also a requirement that any visible surface parking within 100 feet of Waterford Estates Drive will need to be screened with a 3-foot tall screen. And in addition, the multifamily building will need to be screened with additional landscaping that would include some ornamental and evergreen trees. So there'd be a combination of screening that should provide an effective screen.
One of the things that was brought up earlier and was present in some of the letters we received was this misunderstanding with regard to affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And I know that the applicant touched upon that this is capital A, affordable housing is not part of this project. I think at least some of my confusion was because in the goals section of the staff report, it talked about affordable housing, that was one of the goals associated with our comprehensive plan. But I'm assuming that was small a affordable in terms of like just generally apartments. I'm trying to get a sense for why that goal was included in the report.
It may have just been included from a general standpoint. I don't think we were trying to suggest that this would be an affordable housing project. That wasn't indicated in the applicant's letter. So.
Okay, thank you. I think that, at least for me, I was a little not clear on that. Other questions for George? Let me double check here. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant rebuttal.
Good afternoon. So first I want to clarify, I know the question was asked where we were as far as where the applicant was as far as the build of Aristos at 40th and Hohensie Drive. And I want to say that's about a third built out. They're finishing phase 2. They still have phases 3 and 4, and that is why it's anticipated that the start date for this would be start building in 2024. That said, there was a suggestion for deferral. We would request that this application not be deferred. That's because we are under tight timelines under the purchase agreement to acquire the property. And under those contracts, we do need this zoning matter to move forward.
Along those lines, Ann, my question would be, would you rather us defer or vote to approve without your amendments? For myself personally, I would not be voting to approve this without the staff having an opportunity to review the amendments and have some feedback for our edification. So with that in mind, which would the applicant prefer?
I believe that we'd appreciate your comments, and based on your comments, we could move this ahead and work on reaching an agreement with between Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay.
To comment on some of the testimony, let's see, yes, the notice was provided. We used the same list that the city uses to provide notice of change of zone to the surrounding property owners. I would point out that because there has been other development in the area, and as you're aware, long hearings due to that, I personally reached out to some of the neighborhood members in this room based on that, gave them our contact information, and it is based on that we did have subsequent communication with them that I know was shared more in a wider form online with them. And so finally, I think to kind of stick the point on the request for removal of the condition of the turn lane. To stick that point, this project doesn't generate the need for that. The need for that is both already there, and it is also generated by significant development in the area. And so to that extent, this developer should not be required to bear the cost of that turn lane, and it should be borne by impact fees, that the developer's impact fees should definitely contribute to that cost to improvements in the area. And so with that, I think Brad Marshall had a few comments to also clarify on the traffic study.
With regard to the development that's at 48th and Hohensee,
Yes.
I just pulled up a picture of it. It looks like they're 3-story.
Oh, thank you. The intent is to build 3 and 4, to have some flexibility between 3 and 4-story buildings. If there are any 4-story buildings, they would be built on the south end of the property, closer to O Street. The intent is to build 3-story buildings further north where you get closer to the neighborhood.
So well below that height limit.
Correct.
That's already standard.
Correct.
Which is the 55 feet.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Yeah. Brad?
Anytime Bob gives me a chance to correct him, I might take him up on that. I do want to clarify. I think he makes a good point. I don't think we're disputing that traffic is going to be increased by this project in any sense. So what he is really referring to is there's the peak trips in the AM and PM. So relatively, there's very little traffic in the morning being generated under existing conditions. That is true. Our traffic study shows AM trips at 23 and 35 under what was submitted to the city for the application. Primarily, those trips are being generated because of the retail uses or office uses that are identified along 98th Street in that B2 area. So if we were to take those out, that B2 strip that's already approved today, if we were to take that out of the study, those trips are going to drop very significantly, almost back down to almost what existing is, because that is generated in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, people going to the office, people making that right turn into that strip of retail that is generated there. So if it's just the apartment project in itself, and we did allow and try to build in that flexibility for that B2, the office square footages to be possible dwelling units in the future. If those do go to dwelling units, that right turn lane is again, or I guess the discussion of the turn lane is, it's pretty much what it is today, I guess, in that matter. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to make that clarification. If that were, that's solely being driven by the commercial that's in the plan right now.
Okay. Yeah. Rich?
I think we all agree that the right turn lane is going to be necessary. It's just a matter of who pays for it. Okay.
Yeah, we did take a look at it because it's in that taper area. It's in that, I think it can be done. The question just goes back to the city when it's really relevant, given the type of uses and what's being seen built out as far as the project, and if the city's going to do anything permanent with that 4-lane section to the north, given their studies that are coming up.
Right. Understood.
Brad, that turn lane cost-wise would be $75,000?
I've penciled about 200 in just in construction plus soft costs, so we may be at 250,000. That's That's if they were to if the city were to accept our proposal for the turn lanes. It's just, like I said, it's just in a weird taper area. But I think we've got some ideas that could
Reduce costs?
do permanent, the whole thing when you're talking impact fees, you're not doing something temporary, right?
Right.
It's something that's going to have future benefit. We think that a design could be done that is impermanent in nature.
Okay.
Anything else? Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second core.
Shelley?
Hall,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Public hearing is closed, 9-0.
I would move that we approve change of zone 21054.
Is there a second?
Second core.
Discussion. We can discuss both at once.
Yeah, I have mixed emotions on approving the use permit at this time. But as Ann indicated, their plans would be to discuss with planning on the use permit, the turn lane, and some of the other issues that have arisen from letters and such. So that makes me more comfortable with also approving the use permit at this time without these amendments, and let them negotiate then with the city on how this may all happen. And because it will then go to the city council, and it gives them time between now and then, but it allows the project to continue moving forward.
Other discussion?
I agree that I don't want to amend the use permit at all because staff hasn't had time to vet this proposal, and it's a little unclear to me. I think it needs to be flushed out a little more about who's paying for this road or the turn lanes. And I don't feel comfortable with what we know right now making that decision. So there will be, that's the beauty of our system. They've got 4 weeks to kind of hash out some of those details before they get to city council. I do want to say that a successful development has all housing types, single family, multifamily, commercial. And so I've been a bit taken aback in the last, a couple of months that there's such a strong dislike for apartments. And I think that I would much rather have an apartment complex near me than some other things, maybe a lot of other things. But, these are going to be, I think, well-done apartments. And I also want to say that not all apartment dwellers, they might be waiting for their house to be built in Waterford Estates. So they're already living close by and then going to move right there. So they would have a vested interest in that area already. I think that this will be a good project, and it's a good use for the land.
Also, there's many people that are apartment dwellers that don't want to own a home.
Mm-hmm.
And with this being a higher end built property, I think there's going to be a lot of people in that situation that would occupy these units.
Other discussion? Certainly, I support the change of zone wholeheartedly. I agree with my fellow commissioners that I am not comfortable with the motions to amend without input from staff, but can certainly vote to move forward with the use permit as presented with the conditions that were presented in the staff report. I agree. I think that this is a great project for this area. I think that it's, it is only the edge of town for a short period of time at this point, it seems like. And we'll continue to move forward. Shelley?
Okay, this is for change of zone to 1054. Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
I would also move to approve use permit 21010 as with its situation or with the recommendations from the staff report.
Second. Ball.
Shelley?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost,
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
Thank you. We'll move on to,
Okay, the next up for public
Next item.
hearing is 5.1A, Comprehensive Plan Amendment 22003, to amend the Lincoln Lancaster County 2050 Comprehensive Plan to revise the future land use map from commercial and urban density residential to public and semi-public on property generally located at Waterford Estates Drive and Linwood Drive. Associated with 5.1B, change of zone 2201 from AG Agricultural District B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District and R3 Residential District to P Public Use District, also on property generally located at Waterford Estates Drive and Linwood Lane. Also associated with 5.1C, preliminary plat 04011A for a preliminary plat amendment to show a revised sheet layout with associated waiver, also on property generally located at Waterford Estates Drive and Linwood Lane, and this is a final action item. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
I don't see any.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting the site to be disclosed?
No? George?
Thank you. So where we're just to the west of the prior project that we discussed at Waterford Estates Drive and Linwood Lane generally. There is existing AG zoning, B2 zoning, and there's a tiny little area of R3 zoning at the terminus of Waterford Estates Drive presently. And so the proposal is to change the zoning for this large outlot parcel, which consists of 34 acres approximately, to P Public Use District, and also to change the zoning for this area over here on the existing SCC campus, including 7.79 acres approximately, from O3 Office Park District to P Public Use District. The property in question for the undeveloped area is owned by the college, and while the exact buildings or uses are not identified for the undeveloped parcel, the uses will be those of the college and therefore public. The area of the 7.79 acres on the existing campus is to rezone an area that was changed previously in 2009 when there was a partnership planned with a different entity that would have necessitated the O3 zoning because they weren't a public entity.
George, can you back that up a little bit so we can see
Sure,
the
I'll-
larger
yeah,
area?
Sorry, still on the scale from before. Okay, so here's the existing SEC campus area that's O3 to P, and then this larger area to the east is the R3, B2, and AG to P, again to reflect college ownership and intended college uses. And then this is the related CPA, Comprehensive Plan Amendment. Presently, the outlot parcel at Waterford Estates Drive and Linwood Lane is identified for future land use of commercial in the comprehensive plan, and so this would, also with this small area that's urban residential, it would change that designation to public, semi-public for that area. So then moving on to the preliminary plat amendment. Again, this is kind of the, as we saw before, the extent of the existing Waterford Estates goes as far north as Holdridge Street, and then extends further south. This amendment area is here, kind of in the southwest area of the Waterford Estates preliminary plat, the existing preliminary plat. And so the request is to amend the preliminary plat for street layout. And so this, I will show first. The first exhibit is the existing preliminary plat, not the proposal, which shows this is 98th Street off to the east, Waterford Estates Drive. The existing preliminary plat shows a curvilinear extension of Waterford Estates Drive going south to an east-west street. And then it also shows a north-south connection through this flood area, or near the flood area, to O Street. And so what they're proposing to change then with this proposal is Waterford Estates Drive would extend directly to the west. There would be this east-west street that would connect to the east-west street on the neighboring property to the east. And then they would shift this conceptual connection to O Street. And I'll just clarify that that's conceptual. And then there's also a north-south street that's not on the outlot property, but directly to the west on the existing SCC campus that would be also conceptual as well.
George, is that Linwood Drive or Linwood Lane on the south there? Right across on the south side of O.
Oh, that's Anthony Lane on the south side of O. Yes. Linwood Lane is at Waterford Estates Drive on the north.
Okay.
And so as far as that conceptual access change, it would move it onto the property owner to the west under different ownership, and development of that property would involve the requirement likely for turn lane improvements on O Street with a street connection to O Street. It's possible that connection may not be made due to the cost factor as far as the turn lanes, but it should be noted that the owner of that lot, which is the lot here, east of this substation facility, would not necessarily be required to connect to O Street. However, they could gain access from the east-west street to the north with, possibly a cul-de-sac or connection to the north that way. So as part of the conditions of approval, there's a north-south street that is required on the east side of the SCC property to connect to the Waterford Estates Drive east-west street and this other east-west street. So kind of as I showed earlier, it's to have a kind of almost a street loop, if you will. And again, this is due to the block length concern, and then also 911 and future addressing. It is understood they don't have uses identified at this time, but there could very well be multiple buildings in the future that necessitate addressing. We just don't know yet at this time.
George, is that a SCC Drive on the west side there, just north of that parking lot?
Yeah, I think they have some existing and planned facilities, and that's a good thing to mention, that the conceptual would not necessarily bind them or obligate them. It's if they would plat, if they would do future platting of that property, then we would look at that. But it doesn't bind them to install a physical public or private street on their property at this time.
Is that one there now, though?
No, their plan is to extend Waterford Estates Drive and make this connection. And I might let the applicant clarify exactly where that terminates presently.
So that proposed or that suggested route through the Shrine Temple's property is not locked in stone?
It's not locked in stone, but if they would request a change of zone, because it's zoned agricultural, more than likely the recommendation would be to have that street as part of that development proposal.
But could it be put back on the property edge line so that the two properties share the cost of it?
I won't speak to the cost sharing question. I don't know that I can answer that, but I mean, the planning commission doesn't necessarily have to approve the proposal. We're recommending it based on the fact that otherwise there'd be the floodplain concern, and I might let Bob Simmering speak further if you want to get into those.
Oh, he's back, okay,
Those
so I'd
aspects.
left.
But that's the real reason, is it's probably not likely that the street will be constructed, or at least it would be much more difficult to construct in that flood area.
Is there, at this point in time, and maybe this is a question for Bob, is there a need or a justification for that other connection to O Street?
I don't think that, it would depend on what his use is. We wouldn't require it. The thing I'd point out, and we're commenting on it being in the floodplain, it's not just in the floodplain, it's in the drainage way in the original concept, which means you'd be building, some sort of very exotic structure in order to carry this connection, and it might very potentially could drive the cost of that connection more than double what it would be. So it's not necessarily financially beneficial to leave it where it is versus pay 100% of it. Now, we haven't done any engineering on that, but I would just assure you get the Corps of Engineers involved. You have to build some sort of elevated structure, and typically an elevated structure is going to cost multiple times what a structure on grade is. So without doing some engineering, there may not really be even a practical method to make that connection in the original concept.
But this connection would still require median brake for left turn lane and deceleration lanes for going on the east side, the traffic going west.
Yes, it would be a major intersection.
Right. So how much is that, kind of halfway between the existing entrance on the east end of Southeast Community College's property?
The location that they have, if you see this map here, there's just a tiny part of the existing SCC-owned property that is abutting O Street. The Shriners property is here. There's this LES property here, and then further to the west of that substation is where the existing SCC campus is.
But connecting with O Street, right north of where your pen was, yeah, there you go. That's now an entrance into Southeast Community College.
Yes, there's a signalized intersection.
Right there. So, could that roadway that's going to O Street then, which is closer to that than it is to 98th, could that be eliminated and the road going through Wilderness Hills, I believe it is, could that not connect and then on the Southeast Community College property connect back to that existing intersection?
I guess I'm not understanding which.
Well, if you go back to your original, the Waterford estate, yeah.
Okay.
If that was then brought over on the Southeast Community College property, as you're showing, for a connection that way and go to the existing signaled intersection and eliminate that in-between connection.
Sure. If the question is, could someone, once it's completed, drive from Waterford Estates Drive to that signalized intersection, yes, that would be possible. I'll let the applicant speak further to their internal SCC campus plan, but I believe that would be possible, yes.
But in the preliminary plat motion, you are proposing that angled street.
Yes, it's changing it from where it's presently located to the east.
Conceptually.
Conceptually, yes, that's the important thing to note, it's conceptual. This is the existing preliminary plat.
Can you zoom out a little bit?
It's, let me zoom out here again,
Yeah, thank you.
sorry. This is the existing alignment for that conceptual route. This is the proposal to shift it because of the drainage and floodway concern to the west. So not eliminate, but just shift it.
But that shift puts it onto the property owner completely that's not involved with this preliminary plat.
Correct.
Correct, conceptually.
And so that's not, it's only conceptual at this point.
Right, it's just conceptual, it's not binding them unless they would proceed with an application. If they would come in with a change of zone for the property owner to the west, then we would look at that question further.
Steve Hendrickson, the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. If we can go to our viewer, perhaps we can help explain some of this rather than using the overhead.
And George, I'm going to ask you a question real quick while he's pulling that up. So depending on, you know, the shrine temple site, depending on how that develops in the future, a connection on the north side of O Street, you know, that if we extend Anthony Lane, that might not even be necessary depending on what they develop.
It may or may not happen, correct, or be necessary depending on what's proposed.
Okay, so to try to answer the questions here, what you see is the property owned by Southeast Community College. If there's ever going to be a street connection here through this way into the floodway, it needs to be shown now and approved and would be part of this preliminary plat. So by deciding to remove it from this preliminary plat, it can't go back onto this property in the future. Southeast Community College would say we have an approved preliminary plat in 2022. You eliminated that connection at that location. If you would later decide, oh, we don't like the conceptual one, let's move it back, too bad. Well, you approved our final plat. So it's locking it in with this final plat that it will not be here. What George is accurately describing is it's conceptually shown how it would be on the adjacent property. The thing is, because O Street is a highway basically, our street connections can be as much as a half a mile or more apart. So the city isn't requiring this connection. The original development plan was, let's get this connection here. We think it'd be a good thing for our development, when it was going to be 100 acres of commercial development and a shopping center and all these other things. That, you know, so for instance, in the last project, Aristos at Waterford, they may not care if that connection is ever made. We'll hear from the applicant here in a moment, as does SCC care if that connection is made. But definitely by your action, when this preliminary plat is final action, if it's not appealed, if you don't show the connection there, then it's not going to happen there. It's going to happen somewhere else, or it's not going to happen at all. And that's basically what the two things. And the gentleman representing the Shriners will get his case to mention. And that's what we're trying to point out is that, you know, this is a floodway. And as Bob was pointing out, this looks to be a very poor location. That's where it was shown in concept in the past. Probably not a very good location. And so the city's saying, no, it's better to line it up with Anthony Lane. That way we don't have any floodway issues at all. And the details of that would be settled when the Shriner property is perhaps sold to somebody who's going to come in and do commercial development or something else. That would either lock it in its location or lock in that it's not going to happen there. And the gentleman representing the Shriners can talk about, you know, they may see a real benefit to having that access, but that access does come with left and right turn lanes and the cost with that. So hopefully does that help explain the conceptual versus not conceptual in terms of your
Basically, it just eliminates that original location.
That is correct. It would
Right.
eliminate it there. It means that either it's going to happen on the adjacent property or it's not going to happen at all.
Right.
So I just have an additional question to that.
I have
So
questions on that.
if the Shriners develop it, would that be a condition for approval to develop, right? To have that road built?
Yes, if they came in for the change of zone and possibly a use permit or something and went along with it, that would be a condition on that one that, oh, if you want the access, it comes with left and right turn lanes. Now that person representing Shriner, we can get into more testimony. He may say there's an agreement, and maybe that agreement addresses then who's going to help pay for the cost. The change of zone would just say, if you want the access, it needs to have these turn lanes, which would be
But
expensive.
the reality is, George, that where it is conceivably put now, where we had it now, is not a great place for it, whether we sell this or not, because of the floodplain, correct?
For the floodway, yes.
Floodway, yeah, thank you. So even if it were, even if Southeast Community College weren't proposing the changes that they're proposing, it's hard to say that this is the place where we would want this into this particular area. Is that correct?
Right, I think we've talked before about this connection point shifting because of the floodway. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not, can I ask a quick question, Steve, before you leave? So that existing drive, when we went to the site and looked at it, that existing drive, and you look at it on the GIS viewer, because it's always hard with those lines to see whose is what. So that drive that's currently there, is that on the property that we're looking at right now?
We're zooming in now.
Right.
And it looks like that driveway is split between the Shriners property and Southeast Community College. And that may be simply nothing more than an old farm access that has been there for decades.
Right, but is that their logic to be able to have an access from that road? Or
No,
maybe
a farm
historically
access
explain
doesn't
that?
grant you any rights when you come in for a change of zone.
Okay, thank you,
Yeah,
that's what I was
a farm
asking.
access just means for farm equipment, that's a couple times a month or something, you can come and go. When you switch it to commercial, that's a completely different topic.
Okay, so this is not something that they had to have access through there. Got it, okay.
Right, and again, we're just saying they will be getting access through this Boathouse Road or whatever happens to the north, if they decide it's too expensive to use the access to the south. But that certainly, from a commercial standpoint, having a direct access to O Street probably is beneficial compared to not.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, and where that Anthony Lane is.
Okay, I'm a little lost as to where we are, but are there any other questions for George? I believe that was your original presentation, correct? Okay, thank you, sorry. Long afternoon. Okay, is there any other, or applicant? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Thank you, George.
Thank you. My name's Aaron Bright with Olson, 601 P Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. I had thought maybe this was going to be an easier discussion than maybe the previous one was a little bit, but I would want to clarify a couple things to start off with, and then I'm going to give some background information on kind of the application and everything else. If that's showing.
There we go. Perfect.
I'm going to go ahead and just address the O Street connection right away. That's really not even the intent of our application whatsoever at this point. That's actually outside the limits of our preliminary plat. I did show it at the Anthony Lane location because of all the reasons that you have already heard. On submittals, we normally show conceptual layouts 300 feet adjacent to our parcel, and so that's kind of where we had shown that. This discussion really hadn't come up until the last literally few hours about this connection point. So just getting that out there, here's what I would say from SEC's standpoint. We could show it back at the original location. I could have submitted it that way. SEC doesn't really have a care one way or another at this point in time where that location is. So just to speak to Sosastra's point a little bit, we're fine, but you've heard all the reasons why so far planning and LTU are kind of supporting the other location. But so maybe now to the application at hand. Just wanted to share background information to start off with. So SEC as many of you know, has really pursued a growth strategy over the past few years to invest in the campus, to enhance student experience and opportunities, and then also to support future student population growth. It kind of all started off with some master planning efforts they've done over the past 5 to 7 years. And as a result of those master planning efforts, which kind of identified programs, building space, even infrastructure that they needed to do, SEC has really started to invest on their campus here in some specific recent projects that I'm going to point out. Their health science buildings, I'll kind of point to the campus here. So their health science building, which was constructed within the past 2 years, an amazing looking facility for nursing and college students. Student services building addition, kind of a new entry point into their existing building, kind of more user-friendly, more of a front door, so to speak, to campus there. And in addition to that, they've got currently under design a total of 3 projects for new construction that I'm representing here. One is a residence hall, kind of along the east side of their current parking lot, as well as what I'm going to call the STEM building, so a focus on obviously technology, engineering, and math. And there's kind of a future technical trades building that's also going to be programmed at this time as well. So again, SEC, along with the building growth, has also really kind of invested a lot in infrastructure. We talked a little bit about the traffic signal that they recently installed at 90th and O Street, just because of how much traffic they do generate to the parking lots and some congestion that they've had internally. That was a big focus for them. We've brought up sanitary sewer all the way from basically the O Street, kind of where we were talking about that connection point before, all the way up through the existing drainage channel. That's to serve, again, their future growth, part of their master planning efforts. And then also did some facility upgrades on their overall water system to kind of enhance what they have and the capabilities they have for all this new building growth. So that's kind of what's happened so far. I would say with that master planning effort, you can obviously tell a lot of the focus here is kind of what we're calling what would be a future quad area on campus. Currently, it's just a very large parking lot. And so there's a goal from SEC to kind of move from a commuter type college where everyone's driving, parking, and then kind of goes to their class and then heads back out, to really develop more of that campus feel. So part of the master campus is to really kind of ultimately kind of displace some of that internal parking that they have now, more buildings, more green space, kind of more amenities for students and staff. So along with that, and why this application at this time, you'll see on here with the residence hall project, which is under design, scheduled for construction possibly as early as the middle of this year, we're going to displace a significant amount of parking for that project. And so I've kind of conceptually shown what SEC is looking at to, again, make a little more paving, but off-site and away from more from that quad area. We're looking to replace about 600 parking stalls. So this is represented with these 2 areas that we've got shown here. So along with the campus growth back in 2020, SEC purchased the Waterford Estates parcel that's part of the application that you're seeing today. And so really the application that's in front of you now, what SEC's goals are to construct the parking lot to kind of continue to support the parking that they do need as this develops out, and to provide what I'm just going to call the SEC Loop Road for now, which extends on their main campus parcel and then makes a connection through a private roadway over to Waterford Estates Drive. What we've also shown on that site plan, slide that over a bit, is the south roadway along the south side of the property, which kind of leads up to what we're kind of calling that Boathouse Drive connection right now. And again, we talked about the O Street connection a little bit. So that's kind of the application in front of everyone. The change of zone just makes sense because of the, Southeast Community College is a public entity college. Southeast doesn't really have any plans for this parcel yet. Their immediate focus is on their main campus and to develop that infrastructure. And there's nothing that we're formally trying to get accomplished today other than trying to get that private roadway connection made on the north side. In terms of schedule of investment for SEC, I don't foresee, I can't give you a good timeline, I guess, or my best guess. The south roadway connection is likely down the road. I mean, 5 to 7 years, could be 10 years. They just don't have plans yet for what that connection would be. And so we met with planning department about what our goals were, made the application. In terms of the conditions of approval, I think everything there was about what we expected. The one thing that we did reach out to George yesterday and kind of requested an amendment to on the conditions of approval was the condition 1.14, which stated to include a north-south private roadway on the SEC parcel all the way to the east side. And we are actually requesting to amend that to remove that requirement. And I'll kind of go through specifically why. I guess just overall theme is that we're just wanting to maintain flexibility. SEC has their existing main campus. They have an internal roadway network that's completely their own, all of their own infrastructure. And we're looking to get kind of a similar amount of flexibility with the SEC parcel, or sorry, the Waterford Estates parcel now. Specific to this location, the location to try to potentially locate a private roadway on the east side of this parcel, again, private roadway, it would be kind of a 60-foot, call it right-of-way section, 60-foot easement, 27-foot of paving. Just from a financial and timing aspect and kind of a site logistics aspect, that location really doesn't make sense for SCC at all. You can see with, sorry if I'm covering that, with the Aristo site plan, they've already got kind of an access drive in their parking lot going through there. Again, timing-wise, SEC has no intents to build a north-south connection anytime soon or development on this site anytime soon. And so there's really no opportunity for us to kind of co-locate that roadway with the Aristo development. They're just moving, 5 years to 7 years ahead of us. And so then from a financial aspect, SEC would theoretically be investing the money in that private roadway connection, but only benefiting on kind of giving access to the west side only as opposed to other locations. We've talked with George, we've suggested some other locations potentially line up with Linwood Lane. But in the end, that gives us a little bit of pause just at this time because putting that 60-foot swath through the middle of this parcel without any idea as to what we might do there, which could be athletic fields, could be future academic buildings, it could be a number of things to support campus, but we're just not looking to kind of bisect our area at this time with that. So that was the reason for our request to amend that condition of approval. And the only thing I would also say to that is if this was to move forward as we have shown on the site plan now without that north-south connection anywhere, this entire area would still be dedicated as an outlot, which is reserved for future development. So another application would have to come forward from SEC once they have a better idea about what their plans are for that area. And so that would be the opportunity to maybe finalize that location. And so that's kind of what this discussion has been so far with planning department. I think we're agreeing to disagree on that particular request for amendment at this point. But I did kind of want to give the background on that and would answer any questions anyone may have.
Questions? Yeah, Dick?
Would SEC be willing to eliminate that additional connection to O Street?
Oh, this one here?
Yes.
I'll just say it. SEC doesn't need that connection. That's not even SEC's property, and it's not part of this application. It was shown as a conceptual layout, but I mean, it could conceivably not exist there, yes. There is, the value of having a connection there in terms of, you know, commercial access if the Sosostris piece would develop that way. So if I was to report back to SEC, I don't think they would have any objection to not having it on there.
Yeah, my concern is having too many intersection connections with O Street. With it being higher traffic, even though it's reduced to 40 and 45 in that area, it still is 65 miles an hour shortly past there.
Yeah, yes, I think as O Street continues to develop out, the speed limits will get reduced. I think it has already been reduced all the way over to 98th Street and beyond, if I'm not mistaken. And that point is the quarter-mile separation from the existing traffic signal that SEC just did. So I think that would be consistent with access management policy spacing.
Okay.
Other questions? So tell me if 1.1.4 is a deal breaker.
I was going to ask George a little bit about process. I know kind of the last application kind of had a similar thing. I would love to be able to move forward with a vote here. I think me and planning have already kind of understood that we need to kind of continue to work together on what our goals are. So if I was to remove my request to amend that, I believe I still have the opportunity to work with planning prior to city council to get some type of resolution that I think SEC could be agreeable to, and hopefully the planning could be agreeable to as well.
Right.
So maybe if George or others need to confirm, but I think we could move forward by removing that with the understanding that I still have the opportunity to finalize any details before it does get to city council.
All right, well, we'll talk to George about that and see where we're at. Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, is there any testimony in support of this application? And if there's no neutral testimony, come on up for testimony in opposition.
This makes a lot more sense. I wasn't fitting that together at all, because I'm just short of information or something that's not adding up for my little brain. But I think that the biggest thing here is the Sosostris wants to work with SEC. There's lots of options. We don't want to get stuck holding the bag to pay for a road. We're a nonprofit. We're not, you're talking about serious money, and the original agreement was to split it with the original property owners before SEC owned it. So I think that's really all our legal counsel and Sosostris wants to do, is to connect with SEC and see what we can work out. I mean, there's lots of options, including selling it to them or land swap or any number of things that I'm not privy to and I can't speak on. But that's all we want. We just don't want to be left. And I understand that why the road was moved conceptually or otherwise. I mean, it makes this is pretty obvious. But it puts it in our lap.
Sure.
And so we just want to protect ourselves. And we want to get together with SEC and see what different options are, and if they're interested, and see if we can work a deal.
Great.
Do you think you can get that done before the council meeting?
When is the council meeting?
A month after our meeting.
A month after your meeting? When's your meeting?
Now.
Okay, that was the obvious answer, but I don't pretend to understand. Yeah, I don't see why not. We've reached out to SEC, legal counsel, and the engineering firm, and we haven't heard back from them. So that's all we want. We want to sit at the table and discuss it with them.
So when Mark Hunsiker gets back in town, then then you would be able to.
Yep. And he's.
I might just clarify. The preliminary plat is final action at Planning Commission unless appealed to City Council.
Right.
Okay.
Oh.
So it's already been approved.
We decide on it today.
Right.
That's right.
Oh, right here, right now.
Right. But then you would have the right to appeal before.
Okay, right.
We have 14 days.
Right, within 14 days.
Okay.
But any other questions?
Can you state your name and address for the record again, just so that she
Oh,
has it?
yes. My name is David Widener at 1050 Saltillo Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you
for
very
coming.
much.
Thank you.
Any other testimony in opposition? Staff questions?
Yes, I do have one.
George? Go ahead.
At such time that SCC decides what they're going to do with this land, they will have to come back through Planning Commission for approval of a use permit or whatever it is, or?
There would be no use permit. Keep in mind that the P-Public zoning is an exemption. Governmental entities are exempt from zoning. I would mention that the streets could be amended, that like the future streets, just like we're amending now, they could come back later if their plans would indicate more buildings or less buildings, you know, so that it's not like it can never change.
That was kind of going to be my next question, because I see it just says show a public-private roadway. It doesn't say build it. It just says, you know, like this is a conceptual plan right now.
Correct, and I believe, as Aaron mentioned, I think their initial plan would be to final plat just the area for Waterford Estates Drive, so they could physically build that, and then the balance just in an outlot for future development.
Okay. I know there was something in the letter about, you know, like future plans approved by administrative amendment. Would that even be necessary since they're a governmental entity?
Respective of the subdivision, there could be amendments done. There wouldn't be any zoning related approvals, but yes, there could be administrative amendments to the plat.
Thank you.
Other questions for George? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Applicant rebuttal?
Thank you. So after a little bit of additional conversation and understanding, there is some discussion still to be had with the Sosostris folks. We are going to request for a deferral on the vote for the application in front of you. I think that gives us all an opportunity to get to a vote, hopefully with all parties in agreement on what we're trying to accomplish, kind of some of the items that we do have.
Do you
in
want
terms
that
of
on
discussion.
both applications, or just the use permit, or?
Just a preliminary plat.
I think just the preliminary plat, because I don't think change of zone affects anybody one way or another.
Right.
So, yes, thank you for that clarification.
Good clarification. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Rodenberg?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Okay,
I
public
would-
hearing closed.
I would move that we approve Comprehensive Plan Amendment 22003.
Second, Core.
Discussion, and we'll have discussion on all three items.
Well, I am far more comfortable holding the preliminary plat at this point, and let them get some things worked out to make the comprehensive plan amendment and the change of zone. There's no reason we can't go ahead with those two. And then we just, I think, table for 2 weeks the preliminary plat.
Right, or defer, a request for deferral.
Right.
Does it have to have a time frame on the request for deferral?
2 weeks.
Generally, it's 2 weeks and
Yeah, I was just looking at.
and it could be
Council?
extended from that if they're
Back
still
there for
still
2 weeks.
working on
Okay,
it.
perfect.
Tim, I have a procedural question. We've moved to close the public hearing and we voted on it. That movement could have been just perhaps with regard to the comprehensive plan amendment. I think we want to have additional conversation with regard to the preliminary plat, however.
I think what you could do is you could move to defer further action on the preliminary plat and just make it clear in your motion to defer that you intend to have an additional public hearing on the preliminary plat if that's the intent of the board.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's what I was wanting a Tim question.
In the interest of transparency, I do just want to clarify for my huge listening audience that I'm not employed by SCC at this time and haven't been for a while, so I have no conflict of interest.
Any other discussion? I agree with Dick that it makes sense to move forward on the comprehensive plan amendment as well as the change of zone and with the deferral of the preliminary plat with additional public hearing at the next hearing. So, Shelley?
Okay, this is for comprehensive plan amendment 22003. Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Rodenberg?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
I would move that we approve change of zone 22001.
Second, Core.
Shelley?
Okay, Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Rodenberg?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes.
Motion carried 9-0.
And I would move that we defer preliminary plat 04011A until March 16th.
Second, Rodenberg.
And I'll just clarify that that's with an additional public hearing at that time.
Correct.
Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Rodenberg?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton? Motion carried 9-0.
Yes.
I missed somebody.
So at this point, I think that we can move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second, Joy.
Shelley?
Ball?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yeah.
Rodenberg?
Yes.
Ryman Yost?
Yes.
Edgerton?
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.